So, first of all, for those who don't know me, I am Diogo, I'm from Portugal. I work for Booking.com for 1 year and 8 months now. And I'm a senior client-side developer now. That's my Twitter handle. And I pretty much work in optimization and also with all the teams in front end trying to make things like tracking work, for example. So I will start by talking for JS errors, then we'll speak a little bit about timing APIs and how do you use them at Booking, and a little bit about performance. I will not cover like JavaScript performance topics like you should do A instead of B, is more how can you find performance bottlenecks on your web page. And also keep in mind that performance is always a matter of first make it work, and then if you have a bottleneck, then you go and try and fix it. Trying to micro-optimize from the beginning, usually it gives you more pain. And we move fast at Booking. So first we find if it works for a visitor, and then if it's a good experience for them, then that's the moment where we start going for that. So JavaScript errors. So this is a normal topic. We have a lot of browsers, we have a lot of devices, we have a lot of JavaScript engines, and we most of the times are pretty safe. So you can do test-driven development, so trying to come up with all the tests. You'll probably not find all of them, especially in an environment where you have 41 languages, around 60 currencies, and we also make some customizations based on where the user comes from. So when you're trying to do, for example, a simple date picker, where you need to think of right to left languages, if it works for Chinese characters, which is the day of the week that should start. Daylight saving time, it didn't happen here nor in Amsterdam, but in Brazil already happened. It can be like 3 weeks until all of these are back in the same one. So coming up with tests, and we do Selenium tests, not testing during development. We don't do headless browser testing yet, but we have some things that I'm working on. We have a testing team that takes care of Selenium tests and also takes care of making sure that all the experiments that are running are correctly set up, and they also work closely with other departments getting reports. And well, it works on my machine, right? So why should I log the JavaScript errors? They shouldn't be that much. Well, the thing is, when you start thinking about it, there are things that you really can't control. Like, most of you, probably in your website, you have some kind of third-party script. It may be just jQuery being loaded from Google CDN. And if Google CDN fails in some location in the world, then you need to be aware of that. Otherwise, you're just starting getting reports on Twitter, Facebook, all other local social networks saying this site isn't working, and of course you don't want that for a company to be visible. Also, as I mentioned, like Twitter, Facebook, share buttons, these may also produce JavaScript errors. When you use a CDN also, we don't work with Google CDN, but we do work with 3 of others, besides our own static servers. So we need to constantly also make sure that they are not making some kind of dodgy compression on the file, like we had in some 3G networks in the Netherlands, that we were getting a JavaScript error because the compression that they made to distribute through their 3G connection was actually breaking some characters on the uncompression. So things are hard to tackle. And even if it's just to load jQuery from somewhere else, it's pretty much like if they fail, your site doesn't work if you rely on it. And then the other part of it, which is when your user has a plugin installed, actually it runs on the context of your page. And although in most of the browsers nowadays, users don't see the JavaScript errors directly, sometimes they can break it in several ways. For example, if a Chrome plugin is putting jQuery, which is okay, but it's different from the version you use, which is not okay when they don't use noConflict. And there was a few situations that I remember that we actually had to contact a customer because they had a plugin that was doing a rage amount of page views for us. And of course, when you work in a company online, your department likes tracking pixels, and you need to be aware when they put a new one, because we use a third-party container that actually triggers these. It means that when they start a campaign, actually you need to go to them and say, please don't, until they fix it. And yes, you cannot control all the things, but you can mitigate them. Now, I think that what I talked before, it's pretty much things that you are aware of. A lot of things in the browser you don't control. It's the challenge between trying to performance metric or log errors on the server is like you have a beautiful stack trace, you have the line when it happened, everything. But in JavaScript errors, browsers are so friendly to us that they even localize the messages, so they can give you more information. For example, they can say there is an expected identifier, string or number. Now I know that this is probably someone that forgot a trailing comma in an object or in an array. But this one, or this one, or this one, or this one, or this one are actually all the same error. The only thing that changes is one, the browser there is triggering. For example, IE7, IE8, IE9, they produce different JavaScript errors for the same JavaScript error, just because they are a different version. And of course, when you have this kind of Chinese or Arabic characters, you don't really know how to read them. So we do have some mechanism in our event log that actually gathers based on learning. When a new error comes up, we try and find it, and then, okay, this is this type, so let's put it in the same bucket so that we are aware of where it comes. Other things. So, best practices. Minify and compress your JavaScript. Yes, and then you have all the JavaScript errors on line 1, which is also good because you never actually get the column number, which would be very helpful when you have a minified file that you have like a few thousand characters. If you had the column of the character, that will, okay, it's pretty much like this. So one of the things that you can use actually to debug this is if you get something that you really cannot reproduce, one of the techniques is concatenate in one file, remove comments, leave the line breaks, and serve with JZip. Of course, you should serve with JZip always, but because JZip is a very, very nice protocol, and this can really help narrow the line. Even if you're just doing this, if it's a major error that you cannot reproduce because it's from some location that has some ISP that has a wrong routing table, things like an ISP that didn't support dashes on their subdomain. That happened once. So there's a lot of things that you can try to do to minify it. But it's not it only, because this is very helpful also. This is one of my preferred ones. I cannot find method of undefined. So it doesn't give you the actual name of the variable where it was trying to find a method, but also doesn't tell you which method, which means, well, okay, I'll try and chase it. Script error. It's very helpful also. The problem is that, again, best practices may hurt you on this. Best practices say use a cookieless domain to serve your assets. So you can also do sharding of the seed of those domains that allows to take advantage of the number of parallel downloads that the browser allows you to do. Currently on the browsers, unless you tweak the properties by yourself, usually it's 6. But older browsers it was 2 for some. But Chrome and Firefox, they actually have a cross-origin resource policy, that sharing cross-origin resource sharing policy that applies, for example, to AJAX requests, but also means that every error that actually happens inside that file, it will also come as a script error, which also, again, doesn't give you a lot. So this is what I was talking for Chrome and Firefox. And the way you can change this is to actually set up the access control allow origin asterisk or the domain from where you want to serve. Up until not long ago, you couldn't set up like a list of them. It was just domain or asterisk. And well, it's kind of hard when you work with 3 CDNs plus your own static servers to actually set all of those if you cannot set up a list. So things that you can do, for example, for JavaScript errors is when you deploy third-party codes, set up like a server variable that you can change through a database, and you just kill switch them. So that's a potential bottleneck that you have. You can just go to a database and shut it down. And that's a good thing because you don't need to deploy. You don't need to do like, oh my God, I need to fix this because they just broke my site. And that sometimes happens. So you pretty much need to have monitoring on this. And that's part of the thing that I'm going to talk about JavaScript errors today. So how to get JavaScript errors? So window.on error, it's pretty standard. And this is not standard, sorry. It's an API that allows you, it's a function that you can set that actually allows you to get all the JavaScript errors that happen in the context of that window. Works across the board and is as simple as window.on error, and you have a function that receives 3 arguments. This is absolutely true except for Firefox, because they are actually adding some more parameter. Okay, I need to shut down my internet. Sorry. Oh, maybe it's the email. Okay, let's try. They are actually adding column and other parameter that I don't remember right now. So what it gives you is like gives you the message, the URL sometimes, and the line number in which it occurred. And then it also has a nice feature, especially for IE users, that if you return true from that method, the actual error will never be displayed to the visitor. So not even the warning sign in the status bar on the left, that will not appear if you return true. If you return false or nothing else, pretty much you just follows the normal behavior of the browser. But the amount of information is limited. Like you get sometimes the message can be object to string, which is object between square brackets, and then no line, no URL. Sometimes the URL, if the error occurs on a generated script that runs on the VM, on, for example, on V8, you actually get the URL of the page, but if you manage to debug the error, you actually see that when you debug it and stop it, is actually on the VM files that are being generated inside the V8. Then you have the try-catch, which also works across the board, and it's very interesting because you can actually get a stack trace in some. So Chrome and Firefox have stack trace. There are also some tools that allow you to actually stacktrace.js. It's something that allows you to put cross-browser stack trace of all the calls, with the cost, of course. And then you can get it from e.stack, which is the event that gets on the catch, e-message, and then pretty much you can just log wherever the one is available. You have more meaningful errors, of course. It is a performance hit, in a way, because based on latest benchmarks nowadays, the try is actually not very costly. Every time that you go to a catch, yes, there's a big catch there. So you may need a lot of nesting and try catches inside of try catches inside of try catches. So, for example, this simple example, you have a fn with a try catch, and the function is called on fn. The problem is that actually, even if you put the problem is that since that function is actually going through another moment in the thread, because it's the set timeout 0, then you actually never catch that error. It runs, and then you get the new error after it. So you actually need to put different and several layers of try-catch to make sure that everything gets caught. So I've seen some examples of code with try-catch, and you can just end as many try-catch as functions you have, which is not ideal. So actually, I went a little bit too fast, and no, sorry. So getting back to this. Is everyone familiar with this window.onError handler? For those who are not, we can actually, for those who have computers, I will go to this after the break so we can test it out, how it works. And then the try-catch. Try-catch is also familiar for everyone? Doubts, questions? Okay, so moving a little bit further, types of exceptions. You can throw exceptions of these types, and by default you can also send just a string. Throw some string, and you have the error catch. And this is what I have for JavaScript errors, but not before I show you some things. So everyone can see? Okay, so for example, as you can see here, you have an window.onError set up on the booking.com page. What I can tell you here is that this is not actually our onError handler. This is our third-party container that actually is also tracking JavaScript errors. But then they actually have it here, the old error, which is, from what I've seen of the implementation, source element if triggered. They don't set it here. They have it as a global variable that they set on their script, and they actually gather our on error and then put on that function, and then they execute it again just for them to have a visibility on it. So this means that if I do something like this, and I actually put here something that abc dot so what I'm doing here is an iframe injection on the web page, so I can literally run on the context